Alright, Shalom. Before I start, I'm going to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim Rakakodash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Peace, blessings, and salutations to all the elect Akim, Wa'akwath, learning and teaching in truth and sincerity, Salakia. Your brother Malak from GMS Detroit. Hey, this is a real good video right here. This guy, he's going to break down, it says what? The segregation myth. Richard Rothstein debunks an American lie. So he very well might be a Amalekite, right? But he is calling out the hypocrisy of America, specifically with segregation. In today's world, 2024, the so-called white man likes to pretend like he's not racist and that the damage that he caused has all gone away and it's been evaporated. And so now, minorities, specifically Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, we're simply at the bottom because we choose to be. Because we lack education, we produce children illegitimately, and we're just naturally, dumb and stupid, and we're not applying ourselves, which, hey, to a degree, right, many of our people do need to die, right? Many of our people are a bunch of hoodlums. Nevertheless, that does not exclude the so-called white man, by way of his American government, from the wickedness that he's done. The fact that he's intentionally set up systems to keep our people disadvantaged. And so what this guy, I want to let all 8 minutes of this play. He's going to go on to explain how segregation is still well and alive, and how those laws that were set up, decades ago still affect us today, y'all. Remember, now some of our parents and grandparents, might have been able to slip through the cracks to get them a little bit of bread, right? So some of us may have grew up, on a farm somewhere, or had you, a 5-bedroom house because your parents was bringing in some decent bread. But the majority of us, nigga babies, was what? Sharing that bunk bed, sharing the couch, 6 of the cousins all in the room, grandma house, right? Single parent raised households. Why is that? Was it by happenstance? Did we just all wake up and choose to move into the worst places possible and to just be at the bottom of the ladder? Or was there an intentional plot against us? All right, he's going to break it down. So, you know what? I'm just let it play, then I'll get some verses.
We've left untouched the biggest segregation of all that overwhelms everything else and hangs over our entire society, and that is that every metropolitan area in this country is residentially segregated.
Every metropolitan area, the major cities of each state, is segregated. We all know that. This is an undisputable fact.
I've lived in many of them. There are clearly defined areas in every one that I've lived in that are all white or mostly white, or all African American and mostly African American. And all of us accept this as part of the natural environment. It's not we think it's a good thing. We say it's too bad, but we think it's sort of natural, normal, something we accept. It's not that we've tried to do anything about it and have failed. We've never even tried. And so in order to rationalize to ourselves our failure to undo it, we've adopted.
Now, actually, I'm sorry. Let me start with this real quick, because don't get it twisted, right? We not crying because we want to live next to the heathen, or because we want to be buddied up. Because hey, the way that the Heavenly Father set things up from the beginning is the fact that there is division. You are supposed to stay with your people, right? But the problem is Esau, Edom, he's created this false illusionary wall, this fake world where it's all inclusive. Everybody's even. And, there's nothing but love. Meanwhile, he's lying to you and oppressing you. But let me start with this now. We are supposed to be divided, right? Deuteronomy 32:8. It says, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Right, so in the initial intent in creation, especially dealing with us the Israelites, peoples are divided, right? People live with their peoples. You're supposed to want your people to be on top. That's a natural, innate instinct for everybody, right? Verse 9, it says, for the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. And it just so happens to be that us, the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, we are the true biblical Israelites, the chosen people. Therefore, we are supposed to be ruling and have the best portion out of all things in this world. But do you see that in today's world? No. We find ourselves oppressed and at the bottom. Why is that? This man told us we could get a piece of the American pie, but he doesn't let us actually eat at the table.
Our failure to undo it, we've adopted the national myth. And that myth is pervasive. It's pervasive across the political spectrum. Liberals and conservatives hold it. Blacks and whites hold it. The name of that myth is we have de facto segregation. Not something that was created by government like all the other segregations that we undid.
Let me look up that phrase real quick. A lot of pausing, y'all. I'm sorry, but de facto, basically a matter of the fact. As in, it just so happened to be this way. This phrase right here, a legal term, de facto is a legal term that means in reality or in fact. That it says it's used to describe practices that exist in reality, even if they aren't officially recognized by laws or other formal norms. Right? So the fact of the matter, all right, the reality is, that we live in this demonic ass society that's still racist and bigoted, regardless of the fact that the laws have so-called changed.
Even punishment for abortion.
Goddamn commercial. I just clicked off for 2 seconds. Why'd you go do that? 2 seconds. There we go.
We undid in the 30s, 40s. Myth is we have de facto segregation. Not something that was created by government like all the other segregations that we undid in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, but this is something that sort of just happened by accident.
And it didn't happen by accident. So Esau likes to say that we just find ourselves poor by accident, but that's not the case.
It happened because people like to live with each other of the same race. Or it happened because private actors, whether they were real estate agents or bankers or private citizens, discriminated in how they sold or rented homes. Or it happened because African Americans happen to be poorer than whites on average, and therefore they can't afford to move to middle-class communities. De facto segregation is an utter myth. There is no basis to it whatsoever. The racial segregation in every metropolitan area in this country was created by racially explicit government policy designed to create racial boundaries, designed to ensure that African Americans and whites could not live near one another, with policies that are so powerful that they still determine the racial landscape that we see in cities all over the country. Just like we have the myth of de facto segregation, we also think we know what public housing is. It's a place where poor people live, where lots of mothers with children, single parents with children.
And so now he's about to get into the history of public housing. He's about to go in deep, y'all, so buckle in your seatbelts. Once again, things that he likes to use to demonize us with, a lot of the times originally started with him. And so now he's made us to be the face of all the negative things.
Lots of young men without access to jobs in the formal economy, acting out, engaging in oppositional behavior that attracts attention to the police, and a cycle of violence that we've seen in so many places. That's what we think of as public housing. But that's not how public housing began in this country. Public housing began in this country as a program for middle-class, working-class families. During the Depression, poor people were not permitted into public housing when public housing was first created. There was a housing shortage, and public housing was created for people who could afford to pay the full rent in housing, and they did in public housing, but for whom there was no housing available. Everywhere, the Public Works Administration and the other federal agencies that succeeded it created segregated public housing, separate projects for African Americans and whites in cities all across the country, frequently segregating neighborhoods that hadn't previously been segregated, that were integrated. During World War II, the actions of the government intensified to create segregation. They intensified because throughout the country, hundreds of thousands of workers flocked to centers of defense production, of war production, to take jobs that hadn't existed during the Depression. And the migration of workers into centers of defense production overwhelmed frequently the communities where they were working. The federal government had to build housing for these workers if wanted the ships to be produced. For the African Americans, they built the housing on temporary housing because the explicit goal of the housing was that African Americans after World War II would leave and go back to the South. So they built temporary housing for the African Americans along the railroad tracks and near the shipyards, and they built more stable.
Yep, and that's another thing too, y'all. The North never disliked niggas and no, both the North and the South oppressed the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. All right, as we just learned here, the only reason why you niggas had a place to stay up here, right? You know, building temporary shelter for the war workers, and then after they was expecting Jake, to get the fuck on, and that's why later on you're gonna see you start to get Levitt towns. How you have the suburbs, right? Where now Judah, is stuck in the inner cities, and Edom has moved to the outer cities where all the wealth is at, right? Once again, another trick by the devil that we still find ourselves in. All right, but here we learned that public housing was originally set up for them to help them out because they was down bad during the Depression, so they was poor and dusty and broke. But now the finger's been pointed at us to make us look poor and dusty and broke. Why is that? Because Esau, Edom, this magnificent liar, storyteller.
Housing for the white migrants in the white residential areas. Very soon after that, in the mid-1950s, a development occurred everywhere in the country, which was systematic, similar, and widespread. And that was that suddenly all the white projects began to develop large numbers of vacancies. All the black projects began to develop long waiting lists. And soon the situation became so untenable, so conspicuous. You couldn't have projects in the same city, some of which were virtually empty, and the other of which had long waiting lists. The federal government and local housing agencies opened up all projects to African Americans. And then at about the same time, industry left the cities. Fewer and fewer jobs became available to the now increasingly and soon almost all African American population in the public housing. The population could no longer
Right, so we moved in and they moved out. Took all the resources, jobs, and whatnot with them. It's basically walked us into a fucking empty pool. And this is, see y'all, and another thing with this, like I said, don't get it twisted. I'm not doing this so we can try to get some reparations here. I'm just highlighting how we didn't just wake up dumb niggas. This is what I like to specialize in. Because Esau have you thinking we just dumb, stupid monkeys that evolved to be dumb, stupid monkeys. All right, Proverbs 3:31. Envy thou not the oppressor and choose none of his ways. Now, this was the mistake of many of our people back then, right? We're being told to, be civilized, be good niggas. So we're trying to fit in and squeeze in and do what's right. And what does he do? He sets you up to move you out basically into an economic fucking desert. No jobs, no restaurants, no markets. So now we all out there, and now when you look, y'all, decades later, what do we have? The projects, the hoods, right? All these things we got beguiled into moving into, and what did he do? He pulled a pump fake on us. All right, we're gonna get that Genesis, because ultimately, I'll get in a minute. His blessing was to have, the fat of the land. All right, and there's another scripture in Maccabees that I like. There's a tactic that Esau likes to do, and this is how we know who the Edomites are, amongst many things. Hey, he in his heart feels he deserves to have the best of everything, and he's always fighting for that position. And you can see that in daily life when you're, let's say you at the line at the grocery market. He comes up, he'll try to, bitch ass nigga, you see me standing here, he'll try to get in front of you, like he deserves to be in front of you. Because he's the oh so mighty white man, right? You pulling up to get gas, he'll try to, man, back up. Hey, that's a common tactic of E. Matter of fact, let's get this in numbers real quick. The first, right? Numbers 24 and 20. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Let's look at that word first. All right, y'all, this is that word right here. Ra'ashath, it looks like. right? For that word first, Numbers 24:20 says, first, beginning, best, chief, choice part. All right, so Amalek, which is the head tribe of Edom, they are used to the chief part. They were the best part. They had the best part. All right, they're at the front of the nations. That's why you see Amalek today, the false Jays, right? They're running the show down here. That's how they get down. That's the lot they've been given. So you best believe they're going to set themselves in a position to maintain that. They're not trying to come up off of that. And we're not bringing up the past for highlighting this information. We're not holding a grudge. We're keeping it real. Keeping it real. That's all. Alright, these things did not happen by mistake. Let's get some more.
Afford to pay the full cost of its rent, so the government had to begin subsidizing public housing. Maintenance declined in the projects. Prior to this, maintenance workers lived in the projects. They were paid good salaries and lived in the projects. Upkeep declined. The projects became vertical slums that we came to associate with public housing today. Another federal program that was perhaps even more powerful in creating racial segregation, and that was a program of the Federal Housing Administration designed to move white families out of urban areas into single-family homes in the suburbs. At a racially explicit basis, we created a white noose around every urban area with federally subsidized single-family home subdivisions. These were giant subdivisions in many cases. The most famous of them, I'm sure you've heard of it, is Levittown, east of New York City. 17,000 homes in one place. What bank would be crazy enough to lend a developer the money to build 17,000 homes or 15,000 homes in one place for which he had no buyers? We were in a suburban country at that time. People thought the whole idea was lunacy. Who's going to want to live in a single-family home when they can live in the city instead? Any of these developers, the only way they could get the capital to build these giant subdivisions was by going to the Federal Housing Administration, submitting their plans for the development, for approval of the construction materials they were going to use, the architectural design, the layout of the streets in the subdivision, and an explicit commitment not to sell a home to an African American, required by
Say what? An exclusive commitment to what?
the Federal Housing Administration. Development for approval of the construction materials they were going to use, the architectural design, the layout of the streets in the subdivision, and an explicit commitment not to sell a home to an African American, required by the Federal Housing Administration.
We fight for the future where we lower the cost of living for
Get this lying bitch out of here.
America's families.
Bringing down grocery prices, capping unfair rent increases, making sure billionaires pay their fair share in taxes. What we need is what Kamala Harris is fighting for.
Conflict isn't fair. Hunger isn't fair. Being forced
Required by the Federal Housing Administration. The Federal Housing Administration even required, as a condition of these guarantees, developers like Levitt to place a clause in the deed of every home prohibiting resale to African Americans or rental to African Americans. These deeds still exist in these homes today. They're no longer enforced, no longer enforceable, but they're still there.
So, like you said, these deeds still exist to this day. They might not be, specifically enforced, but they're still there. And so we see now the results generations later. We couldn't buy the good parts. We couldn't rent them, dwell in them, nothing. So he set himself up in a situation to make sure he was going to get his blessing. All right, matter of fact, let me get that real quick. He said, you niggas ain't going to... He said, I'm going to fulfill this Genesis, goddammit. Genesis 27 and what? Let's take a look at Esau's blessing. Yep, Genesis 27 and 39. That's what I'm focusing on. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and the dew of heaven from above. What does this mean, y'all? This is parabolic speech. Does this mean he's going to be living in outer space and be holding some fat woman the color of earth, blue, red, and green? No. Esau has the best places on the earth in his possessions. The resources, all right? He has control over the best places on earth to live. And he did not get them through honesty. He did not get them through, noble achievement. He lied. He cheated and he stealed his way to the top. All right, Eddie Guerrero, the theme song, right? I lie, I cheat, I steal. That should be Esau's theme song. But this was his blessing, and so we see, and this has occurred over millennia, not just in America, but we see how he got this set up here in America. Bottlenecked us into a shithole while he opened up the better places for himself, knowingly sucked us into a bad situation, and then set up laws to keep it to where you niggas can't move in here, you can't buy anything over here, and if any one of our people sell anything to you, we will prosecute them. So, and like he's gonna go on to state, y'all, remember, all this property decades ago, these things have been sold, people have made tens of, hundreds of thousands of dollars off of this. This is why their grandparents and whatnot have businesses and connections, and yours don't. Nigga, everybody in your family's still renting. Why? Because Esau Edom. Alright, America is a hallucination. Like the Arab dude said a couple videos ago. This shit has never been for you, nor will it ever be. You have to be asleep to chase the American dream, nigga.
They're no longer enforceable, but they're still there. What was the consequence of this? Well, those homes in those days, in all of these suburbs, they sold for $10,000 or less, $8,000, $9,000 a piece. In today's money, that's less than $100,000, probably $90,000. African Americans who were prohibited. Not they didn't want to, not because they didn't like living among whites. They were prohibited from moving into these suburbs, and they could easily afford to do so. Any working class family can afford to buy a home for $90,000, roughly twice national median income. Those homes and developments like that now sell for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and more. The white families over the next couple of generations gained, you can do the arithmetic, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in equity. They used that equity to send their children to college, to take care of medical emergencies, to take care of economic downturns, most importantly, to bequeath it to their children, who then had down payments for their own homes. African Americans who accumulated none of that wealth as a result of this federal subsidy had none of those abilities. Today, nationwide, African American incomes are on average about 60% of white incomes. African American wealth today is 10% of white wealth. That enormous disparity between a 60% income ratio and a 10% wealth ratio is entirely attributable to unconstitutional federal housing policy practiced in the mid-20th century that has never been remedied. It's a constitutional violation, and of course
unconstitutional housing policies practiced in the mid-20th century that have never been remedied. That's why you're living in these squalor. That's why you found yourself in this squalor, Jacob. In today's world, the majority of us, like I said, some of our parents and grandparents was able to shift and fight hard, slide through the cracks, try to maintain a little, but the majority of us find ourselves as eternal renters from place to place. We not, in the movies they show you Esau punk ass, the kid, he'll have a wall in the house with the markings on the wall each year as he's getting taller. Your ass don't got none of that, our black asses, because you was never in one place long enough to do some goofy shit like that. All right. Did we wake up like this? No. Esau Edom made sure things were like this. And so now you have the devils of the day. Oh, well, that was my ancestors. Well, it wasn't me. Well, like he said, these things were bequeathed to you. They were passed down to you. The butchery, the slaughter, the lying and stealing that your forefathers did allows your little retarded ass to be going to college and to be up in the club every weekend and to be all up on social media, while other niggas can't afford to go and have to get to work right at 16 or whatever the fuck. If you ain't getting kicked out by your mama by then, because you look too much like your fucking daddy. Somebody say I'm lying. I thought not.
Determines the ongoing racial inequalities we have today.
The color of law. You can already see redlining in there and whatnot. So that's about it. That was a pretty decent clip. He broke it all the way down. All right, and what I want to do, I'm going to get this last scripture, then we're going to look up a word. This is something that Esau Hey, we got you. Hey, man, these scriptures, y'all, I'm telling you, y'all, these scriptures, God got this nigga down, man. We got this motherfucker. Boy, the scriptures, man, y'all, call Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, man. We have all things through the knowledge and wisdom given to us by Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, by way of the Holy Spirit, right? Came down to our apostles, their teachers, right? The men who taught them. Then they came up on a level, taught us, man. We have the answers to everything. All right, look at this. 2 Maccabees 10, I'm going to start at 14. It says, but when Georgius was governor of the holds, he hired soldiers. All right, this is one of the guys fighting against the Maccabees. It says, and nourished war continually with the Jews. And then what? And therewithal the Idumeans, Edomites, having gotten into their hands the most commodious holds, kept the Jews occupied, and receiving those that were banished from Jerusalem, they went about to nourish war. All right, so we see here that the Idumeans, the Edomites, they had a tactic of what? Taking the commodious holds. Let's see what commodious means. Let's see what commodious means, y'all. And it all... Come on, dude. What the fuck? You're literally just working a second ago. Here we go. The Idumeans are taking the commodious holds. Here we go. Commodious. Beneficial. Convenient. Right. Convenient. Useful. Proper. Fit. Appropriate. Satisfactory. Conveniently roomy. Spacious. Boom. So the Edomites, according to their blessing, they immediately when they show up, they take the best places. And we see that there in that Maccabees, they were using it to have an advantage over the Israelites at that time. That was, trying to fight against the Greeks and not give in to complete Hellenism. Well, the Edomites was using that opportunity to run up in and take some of our places, some of our cities. They did this when the Babylonians invaded us by way of Nebuchadnezzar, all right, the Neo-Assyrian Babylonian Empire, right? Who was there? Who burnt down the temple? Who was there cheering on the Babylonians as they was getting us about the land? And who came in and took over? The Edomites. You can go to 1 Esdras, the 4th chapter, to prove that. Who came in? Who came in and moved in, and we had to fucking kick their ass out? Somebody say I'm lying. 1 Esdras 4 and what? Full circle, y'all. The same thing. Hey, nothing new under the sun. He's doing it now. He was doing it back then. 1 Esdras 4 and 44. To send all away the vessels that were taken away out of Jerusalem, which Cyrus set apart when he vowed to destroy Babylon, and to send them again thither. Thou also hast vowed to build up the temple which the Edomites burned when Judea was made desolate by the Chaldees. All right. So we see here that Edom was present when we was being kicked out, and that they were told to what? Oh yeah, verse 50. What do they have to do? Relinquish what? 1 Esdras 4 and 50. And that all the country which they hold should be free without tribute, and that the Edomites should give over the villages of the Jews which they then held. So this is the common tactic of Edom: show up, take over, get the best spot, and make us, the Israelites in particular, live in squalor, while he takes from us that which is ours. All right, this ain't a myth. We ain't making shit up. And we had one of their own, Richard Rothstein, blowing the whistle on them. That's a common tactic that the Edomites practice, and we're not crazy. All right, so that's about it, y'all. Hope this was edifying. I'm gonna give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash, to honors to the elders and apostles at Millstone. Peace, blessings, and salutations to all the Akim wa Aqua, learning and teaching in truth and sincerity. Shalom.